It's the Christmas season, as exhibited by the Christmas tree in a shopping mall. Of course. You know, this Christmas tree is actually like a whole lot bigger usually every single year. But this year it's smaller, probably because they couldn't really afford it. But it's funny how like every single Christmas we dread all the decorations that pop up everywhere. But when it doesn't pop up everywhere, it's a strange feeling. It doesn't feel right. It feels like something's off. And it's funny, we have this love-hate relationship with Christmas, where from one end it's this season of joy and cheer and love and thankfulness, and then on this other end there's this underlying implication that feelings of grief and sadness and loneliness and hopelessness and desperation and anger all need to be suppressed in the name of joy and cheer and love and thankfulness. It feels fake and phony and gross. It wasn't always this way, the way Christmas was celebrated, so commercialized and so forced. In fact, when the good Christian Puritans came over to this land that we're in America, they actually didn't celebrate Christmas. It was actually illegal to celebrate Christmas for a while. And the reason was because they associated Christmas with England and the degenerate Dutch that they escaped from in the Netherlands, who celebrated Christmas with wild, drunken parties. And that's how Christmas was celebrated from the early Middle Ages. Wild, drunken debauchery. Jesus is born, let's party. And they were like, no, we're the good Christian Puritans who are civilized and distinguished. We don't do that. And so they didn't do that. And eventually, as businesses started to celebrate Christmas and say, this is a time for everyone to get a gift for somebody, people actually wanted to celebrate Christmas. And so this problem, this little dilemma was solved with a poem. Mr. Clement Clark Moore, who's the son of an Episcopal bishop, in 1823 wrote a visit from St. Nicholas, where he said, "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there." Yeah, that's where St. Nicholas and the whole Santa Claus thing came from. And suddenly Christmas was about being and having a quiet, gentle, civilized, domesticated celebration with your family indoors. And therefore the underlying implication was the less gentle, the less quiet, the less civilized, the less domesticated parts of yourself you suppress in the name of joy and cheer and all that stuff. Yeah, that feeling still stays today, that weird tension. And then a couple decades later, Charles Dickens wrote a book called A Christmas Carol. In England, Christmas started to not be celebrated like it was before. People couldn't take time off of work to get drunk and debaucherous because their bosses weren't giving them time off work during this economic downturn. And so Christmas wasn't celebrated like it was. And so Charles Dickens writes A Christmas Carol, and Christmas is reborn in England, and it spreads to the United States. And it's based on what he calls a carol philosophy, this new way of understanding Christmas. Scrooge's nephew, Fred, says, "I have always thought of Christmas time as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of other people below them as if they were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys." And what's funny is, like, on the surface, that can sound like so nice and lovely, people opening up their hearts to people they didn't before, and people treating those that are below them better than they did before. But then we, of course, ask, okay, then what happens afterward then? Also, can we please address why we have people who are above and people who are below? Can we address the fact that that hierarchy exists, that class distinction is there, instead of having a time of the year where we celebrate those above treating those below a little bit better? If we actually cared, we would do our part to remove that distinction. It's like that weird mountaintop conversion that we know so well, where someone has this big, powerful experience and then they realize, oh, I could be such a better person. I need to be such a better person. And then they go back and they succumb to their old habits. And then they're stuck with simply who they actually are. But what if you are actually fine exactly as you are? And what I mean by that is, what if you are worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are, not as you should be? Brennan Manning used to say that before he died, the preacher, that God loves us just as you are, not as you should be, because none of us are as we should be. And what if Christmas can be a time where we can acknowledge that you are loved, you are worthy of love and belonging just as you are, and those around you are also worthy of love and belonging just as you are. And this can be so much more of an authentic experience instead of one that demands our big Christmas conversion. And if any conversion does occur, it's because it's a result of abundance of love, not lack of it. And so during this season, you may want to tell your mom or whoever else, hey, do you realize this season is just like super consumeristic and really just a ploy for these businesses to get our money as we buy their products, making us feel like we have to buy gifts and all blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, that's true, obviously. But what's funny is another way to communicate what you're trying to communicate is by saying, hey, I love you exactly as you are, and I want to spend time with you because I love you. So therefore, I don't care about this and this and that, because I just love you and I just want to spend time with you. And that's what Christmas can actually be, where we can acknowledge that we don't need all this extra stuff that makes us feel like we need to have these big Christmas conversions like Scrooge, but realize that you are worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are, and so is everyone else around you. And then when Christmas is over, we could continue the work of actualizing that truth in our everyday material reality, working to give everyone who is worthy of love and belonging the resources they need to survive, and removing the class distinctions that we live under today, where workers don't just get a nice Christmas bonus and Christmas time off, but where they can actually achieve autonomy and ownership over the products of their labor. That's the kind of world we should be fighting for, and I think that's a way better Christmas philosophy than the dangerous centrism of a carol philosophy.